Hey guys, welcome to episode 11 of Scientific Drinking. My name is Mas, and tonight we're talking about science and scientific philosophy. Cheers. Tonight I'm drinking Orange Blossom Brewing's Honey Pilsner. This guy, surprisingly, it's 11%. For a Honey Pilsner, 11%. You can definitely taste it. It's like mommy's kisses. So today's topic is a little bit more abstract compared to previous episodes, but we'll get through it, I promise. But before we get to it, first thing we're going to talk about is recent news. Now, SpaceX is about to perform their launch abort test. I told you before last episode they were about to test their launch abort system, and they did, but this is an in-flight launch abort test. They're going to put it on top of a Falcon 9 and launch it into the air. And get this, it's actually going to explode. They're going to actually blow up the Falcon 9 to legitimately test the launch abort system. Now, that is a true example of test it like you fly. And it's something we really can't do with an SLS. Would you really be comfortable with this blowing up $2 billion like that? Maybe not. Second piece of news is Subaru and Toyota are getting together once again to produce the next generation Subaru BRZ Toyota GT86, soon to be called the GR86, in line with their other GR cars. Now, this might seem off topic. What does this have to do with science? Well, nothing. I just love the car, and it's my episode. I can talk about cars for a while if I want. In fact, I can do an entire episode on scientific drinking about cars, scientific driving, but not drinking driving. That's bad. Now, this is significant because it actually has a turbocharger on it, and that's something fans have been dying for since the initial car came out in 2013. So 9 years later, it looks like we might actually be getting a turbocharged BRZ/FT86 GR86, whatever it's called. Now, back to the topic at hand, talking about Boeing. Recent news suggests they've appointed a new CEO, Dave Calhoun. And Dave Calhoun is kind of an insider. He's been with Boeing for a long time already. He's a product of the old GE mentality of running a business, which pretty much means make the shareholders happy and your business is happy. That was the same model that McDonnell and Douglas had before they almost failed and were bought out by Boeing. And then they brought that mentality into Boeing, superseding the traditional mentality at Boeing of engineering excellence. So it didn't work out so well for McDonnell and Douglas. It hasn't been working out so well for Boeing. And really, with Dave Calhoun as CEO, humbly, I don't see that changing anytime soon. To the topic at hand. This is something that requires a little bit of stepping back, because we've been doing a lot of episodes about engineering and science and astrophysics. When I say a lot, I mean 10. I'm up to 10. Now we're going to talk about the actual idea of science itself and the philosophy behind it. In this episode, we're going to start by talking about science itself, moving on to scientific philosophy, talking about empiricism versus rationalism, and finally coming into the topic of whether science is a religion or the science-religion relationship, which is, spoiler alert, a little bit more complex than it might seem. So before we get started, let's cover up some sources. Where am I getting this information? Why am I talking about it? So the first one by itself is Hans Rickenbach's Rise of Scientific Philosophy. Pretty good read by itself, very informative and thought-provoking. It goes hand in hand with a couple of other books that I highly recommend on this topic or related to this topic. And one of those is The Intelligence Trap by David Robson, a great read. Really talks about the mentality of when people think they're intelligent. Now, it kind of touches a little bit on the Dunning-Kruger effect, but it's more complicated than that, and definitely worth a read, especially if you're someone maybe getting into science and pursuing a PhD. You're not infallible. It extends beyond that, and kind of this weird effect that happens when, maybe you win a Nobel Prize, because God knows there's so many people with Nobel Prizes. And the third and final reference is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. And it's an interesting anthropological look at human history. It was really a different perspective on the nature of religion, both in human history and human psychology and sociology. Now, to our main topic itself is science. What is science? Well, science by itself is a tool, and it's an abstract tool. I'm going to compare science to Ford, which seems kind of random, right? So what do you think of when you think of Ford? You think of the cars. But what is Ford really? Is Ford the cars they make? The factories in which they build the cars? Perhaps Ford is the people that make up the company itself. Well, really, Ford isn't any of those things. You take away any of those one things and Ford still exists, right? It's the same thing with science. You take away the scientists, you take away the experimental apparatus, what's the plural of apparatus? You take away all of that and you still have science. It doesn't go anywhere, it still exists. It's an abstract tool, it's an idea. That being said, the philosophy behind science, what drives the scientific method, drives the procedures that produce all that we take for granted today, including the medium through which you are watching this video, the International Space Station flying above us, and indeed the safety of the food we eat, are all products of the scientific method. in one form or another. Now, this method is driven by empiricism, which is the root philosophy which has driven science and the scientific method. Empiricism, as opposed to other philosophies, dictates that we can understand and learn about the world around us through observation, test, and measurement. Repeatability is important, and you can never 100% be sure about anything, which is a little bit of a shaky ground to stand on. If you can never be 100% sure about anything, how are you supposed to live your life? Well, we go about it pretty well every day because none of us are really sure of anything. Now, swallowing this idea of being comfortable with something that you don't know and being comfortable with saying, hey, I don't know, but I'll look that up, is extremely important going forward. It's extremely important psychologically, sociologically, it's important to how we rule our governments, but it's also an uncomfortable idea. And not everyone is really comfortable saying, well, I don't know. And it's so much more comforting to see our leaders say, I know that 100%, I know that to be true, and seeing them be confident gives us confidence. But there's a certain amount of value in humility. And it's sometimes one of the reasons why science is misconstrued, because scientists are so comfortable walking up and saying, hey, I'm not sure if this is true, but this is what the data tells us. Well, the average Joe might interpret that as, well, the scientist doesn't know anything. If he doesn't know it's true, what value is it? Well, there's a lot of value in being uncertain about something. Even in the most rigorous of scientific papers, the conclusion will usually say something like, we believe with a certain amount of certainty that this is true, rather than this is absolutely true and we're 100% sure. You're never going to see a scientist actually say that they're 100% sure about anything. Now, the counter to this empirical method of gathering data and presenting your conclusions is rationalism. Rationalism starts on the foundation of what you know to be true and following logical conclusions step by step until you arrive at your conclusion. Rationalism is the foundation of many religions. An example of this is presented by Plato about Socrates. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. Seems pretty logical, right? Through the mindset of rationalism, it isn't possible to draw any conclusion about the world through a series of logical steps alone, without needing to actually observe or gather data about anything. Now, before we say this is ridiculous, keep in mind that Sir Isaac Newton himself was a rationalist. Now, granted, his 3 laws are rather empirical laws. They were laws that are based on observation and measurement of the heavens. That being said, he did spend a tremendous amount of his life digging through the Bible looking for hidden clues that he believed existed there through logical, rationalist thought alone. However, this brings us to the intersection of rationalism and empiricism, which is science and religion. Now, usually when we think about religion, we think of religion as a set of moral guidance provided by heavens, or maybe the guidance of spirituality, or something metaphysical, transcendent, supernatural, something spiritual that isn't really connected to reality. And by most standards, when people say religion, that is what they're talking about. Religion, in the most broadest sense, in its most absolute definition, is a set of principles and guidelines that determines your behavior. So in the broadest sense, scientific philosophy, and indeed the application of science, could be construed as a religion. It is what some people consider the most important thing. However, some people believe that guidance through another means is the most important. And that doesn't just mean a god or gods or spirituality. We're talking about some people are guided by perhaps money or fame or equality. All of these, in the broadest sense of religion, can be defined as a religion. When you reach out to define science as a religion, you must also concede that socialism, conservatism, capitalism, narcissism, pessimism, all of these things by themselves, if held as the most truest form of determining morality and your destination and priorities in life, then you must concede these are all religions. Now, I know this episode's a little bit abstract compared to other episodes, but if you have any ideas about where we should go from here, any thoughts about the episodes, any contradicting opinions or thoughts, please feel free to tell me either directly or in the comments below. I'd be happy to hear your opinions and debate my thoughts, or perhaps if there was something that I didn't explain very well, I'd be happy to elaborate to a certain extent. I really hope this doesn't go viral. I can't handle that. So thanks for watching. I don't know what I'm gonna do next week, but stick around and find out. Cheers. Oh, what, you thought I was gonna finish it? I told you it's 11%. I still wanna stand. Shit.